Dog didn't run to him. It just stood there, watching, like it had been waiting for a long time. Ethan thought he was just adopting a stray, another quiet life to fill the silence. But some animals don't enter your life by chance. They return for a reason you haven't remembered yet. The more he looked at the dog, the more something inside him refused to stay still. A mission he thought was over began to feel unfinished, and a memory he believed was true started to come apart, piece by piece. If this story speaks to you, please like the video, subscribe to support the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. The mornings in Cedar Key came in gently, like they were careful not to disturb anyone who had chosen to stay. The sun didn't rise so much as it revealed itself, slowly peeling the darkness off the surface of the water, turning the gulf into something that looked almost forgiving. The air carried salt and the faint metallic whisper of old docks warming under light. Somewhere far out, a boat engine hummed, steady and indifferent. Ethan Cross was already awake before any of it mattered. He stood on the narrow wooden porch of his small house, a mug of black coffee cooling in his hand, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Not because there was something to see, but because there wasn't. That was the point. Out here, nothing demanded his attention, nothing pressed in too close. He preferred it that way. At 45, Ethan carried himself like a man who had been taught to move with purpose and had never quite unlearned it. Even now, barefoot on aging wood, there was a quiet precision in the way he shifted his weight, the way his shoulders remained squared without effort. His body had softened only where time insisted, but the structure remained, disciplined, contained. His reflection in the glass door behind him looked like someone who belonged to a different place. Someone built for sharper environments. He didn't turn to look at it. Instead, he took a slow sip of coffee, eyes narrowing slightly as a seabird dipped too low over the water. Movement registered before thought. Always had. That part never left. His days followed a pattern so consistent it almost erased the need to think. Run before the heat settled in. Check the small motorboat tied to the dock behind the house. Cast a line out past the shallows, more for the rhythm than the result. Avoid the parts of town where conversation stretched longer than necessary. It wasn't isolation in the dramatic sense. He wasn't hiding, he just didn't step in. People in Cedar Key had learned to accept him the way they accepted the tide, present, predictable, not something to question too deeply. A nod at the bait shop, a brief exchange about weather. Nothing that lingered. It worked. Or at least, it held. There were nights when sleep came easily, like a switch flipped somewhere deep in his mind. And there were nights when it didn't come at all. On those nights, Ethan didn't fight it. He didn't pace or turn on lights or search for distraction. He would sit in the dark, elbows on his knees, listening to the low breath of the ocean through open windows. Sometimes images surfaced, not full memories, not clear enough to grasp, just fragments. A flash of red light against metal, the sound of something heavy hitting water. A voice, maybe his own, cut off before it finished forming. He never chased them. He had learned, somewhere along the way, that chasing incomplete things rarely made them whole. So, he let them pass. Like everything else. The animal shelter sat just beyond the edge of town, where the paved road gave way to gravel, and the air smelled less like salt and more like dust and sun-warmed wood. Ethan hadn't planned to stop that morning. He told himself that later. At the time, it had felt like a minor adjustment, just a slight turn of the wheel, a decision made without weight. He had been driving back from the dock, hands loose on the steering wheel, when he noticed the sign half hidden behind a leaning fence. Cedar Key Animal Rescue. The paint had peeled unevenly, like it had been exposed to too many seasons without complaint. He slowed, not because he needed anything, just because. Inside, the air shifted. The outside world, bright, open, wide, gave way to something enclosed, layered with sound. Not loud, not chaotic, but alive in a different way. Soft barks, the shuffle of paws against concrete, the low hum of an overhead fan working harder than it should. A woman looked up from behind a worn wooden desk as he stepped in. She was somewhere in her late 50s, maybe early 60s, with sun-lined skin and gray hair pulled back into a loose knot that looked like it had been done quickly and left alone. Her posture was relaxed, but her eyes were alert, the kind that noticed things without making a show of it. "You looking for something?" she asked, voice calm, unhurried, or just passing through? Ethan paused just inside the doorway. He wasn't sure how to answer that. "Just looking," he said finally. She nodded once, like that was enough. "Well, they're all out back. Take your time." No pitch, no pressure, just space. He appreciated that. The kennels stretched along a shaded walkway, each enclosure separated by chain-link fencing that carried the faint echo of movement. Some dogs barked as he passed, sharp and insistent. Others retreated, watching from corners with quiet caution. Ethan moved slowly, not stopping long at any one place. He didn't reach through the fences, didn't call out. He simply observed, the way he always had. One dog jumped repeatedly at the gate, energy spilling over in every direction. Another lay flat against the ground, eyes following him without moving the rest of its body. Each one reacted. Each one told a story, if you knew how to read it. He wasn't looking for anything in particular. That was the truth, which made the moment he stopped feel off. The kennel was at the far end, set slightly apart, as if distance had been given to it on purpose. Inside, a German shepherd stood near the back wall, body angled, not fully facing him, not fully turned away. Still. Too still. Its coat was the familiar blend of black and tan, but uneven, dulled in places like it had been worn down rather than aged naturally. One ear stood upright, alert. The other tilted slightly as if it had forgotten how to hold itself the same way. Its eyes found him immediately, not with excitement, not with fear, with something else. Recognition, maybe, or the absence of surprise. Ethan didn't move closer. He didn't speak. For a moment, the sounds of the shelter seemed to fall away, not because they stopped, but because they no longer reached him in the same way. The dog took a step forward, then stopped, not closing the distance, just adjusting it. Ethan felt something shift, subtle, immediate, the same way his body used to react to a change in atmosphere he couldn't yet see. He exhaled slowly. "What's his name?" he asked, without looking away. The woman's voice came from behind him. "Don't have one that's stuck," she said. "We've been calling him Rook." Didn't seem to mind. Rook. The word settled somewhere deeper than it should have. Ethan stepped closer to the fence, not reaching out, not testing, just there. Rook's posture changed slightly, not relaxed, not defensive, measured, like it was waiting for something, or remembering. A faint breeze moved through the open sides of the shelter, carrying in the smell of salt again, threading it through the enclosed space. Ethan became aware of his own heartbeat, steady, controlled. And then, the dog shifted its weight. Not away, forward. Just enough that the chain-link fence between them caught the light differently, casting a brief pattern across Ethan's boots. Rook's gaze dropped, not to his hands, not to his face, to his feet. More specifically, to the space just in front of them. It took another step, closer now. Close enough that Ethan could see the fine scar circling part of its neck, hidden beneath fur, unless you knew where to look. Close enough that he could see the way its chest rose and fell, not fast, not panicked, but deliberate, like it was holding something back. Then, without warning, Rook lifted one paw and placed it gently against the bottom edge of the fence, not scratching, not pushing, just resting it there. Ethan didn't understand why that mattered, but it did. Something about the gesture felt specific, intentional. His hand tightened slightly around the coffee cup he had forgotten he was still holding. He should have stepped back, should have broken the moment. Instead, he stayed. "You thinking about taking him?" the woman asked. Ethan didn't answer right away. He studied the dog, the posture, the stillness, the absence of wasted movement. This wasn't a stray in the usual sense. This was something that had been trained, disciplined, then left or lost. He felt the question forming before he could stop it. "Where'd he come from?" The woman shrugged lightly. "Found near the marina a few weeks back. Wouldn't let anyone near him at first. Didn't bite, just watched." Ethan nodded once. That tracked. He looked at Rook again. The dog hadn't moved. The paw was still there, resting against the fence like a placeholder for something that hadn't happened yet. Ethan set the coffee down on a nearby ledge. For the first time, he reached out. Not fast, not hesitant, just controlled. His fingers stopped inches from the metal. Rook didn't flinch, didn't retreat. It simply watched him, steady, unblinking. Ethan felt it then, not memory, not recognition in any clear sense, but something close enough to both that it unsettled him. A quiet certainty, without explanation. He lowered his hand, stepped back, exhaled. "I'll take him," he said. The words came out before he could examine them, before he could apply logic. The woman studied him for a moment, then nodded. "All right." No surprise, no questions, like she had seen this kind of decision before. Later, as Ethan led the dog toward his truck, the sun had climbed higher, burning away what little softness the morning had offered. Rook walked beside him, not pulling, not lagging, matching his pace, not like a pet, like a presence. Ethan opened the passenger door. The dog hesitated, just for a second, then climbed in. Settled, facing forward. Ethan stood there a moment longer than necessary, hand resting on the edge of the door. He looked out toward the water, visible just beyond the line of buildings. Still calm, still open, still giving nothing away. He closed the door, walked around to the driver's side, sat, started the engine. As the truck pulled away, he glanced once toward the passenger seat. Rook didn't look at him. Its gaze was fixed ahead, alert, waiting. Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel just slightly. A thought surfaced, uninvited, incomplete. Not a memory, not yet, just a feeling, heavy, unresolved. I need this dog. He didn't know why, and for the first time in a long while, that mattered. The first night, Rook didn't sleep. Not in the way most dogs did. Ethan noticed it without trying. He had left the back door slightly open, the way he always did, just enough for the night air to move through the house, carrying the steady rhythm of the ocean with it. The small living space held on to sounds differently after dark. Every shift in wood, every breath of wind through the frame, every distant engine carried farther than it should. Ethan lay on the narrow bed in the adjacent room, eyes closed, body still. He wasn't asleep, not yet. Across the house, Rook moved, not pacing, not restless, measured. A soft step across the wooden floor, a pause, another step. Ethan listened. The dog circled the perimeter of the room once, then again slower. It stopped briefly near the door, head angled toward the outside. Not reacting to anything specific, just checking. Ethan exhaled through his nose. That wasn't anxiety. That was routine. He had seen it before, not in homes. By morning, nothing in the house had changed, but the space felt different. Occupied, not filled. Observed. Rook stood near the window as sunlight filtered in, casting long lines across the floor. Its body remained angled toward the door, ears alert. One straight, one tilted, just enough to break symmetry. Ethan moved through his usual routine, but it no longer flowed uninterrupted. When he reached for his keys, Rook shifted. When he stepped toward the kitchen, the dog adjusted position. Not following, intercepting. At first, Ethan ignored it. He grabbed his coffee, pulled on his boots, stepped outside. Rook followed then, but only after pausing at the doorway, scanning the frame, the threshold, the corners above it. Ethan stopped halfway down the steps, watched. The dog lowered its head slightly, then stepped through. Clear. Ethan frowned. That wasn't hesitation. That was a clearance check. The run that morning felt shorter. Not because Ethan moved faster, but because something disrupted the rhythm. Rook didn't run beside him like a typical dog. It didn't match pace or chase scent trails. Instead, it moved in arcs, cutting slightly ahead, then circling back, always positioning itself between Ethan and whatever direction opened too wide. When a cyclist passed on the narrow road, Rook slowed, body angling outward, watching. Not aggressive, not curious, assessing. Ethan said nothing, but his breathing changed, subtle, tighter. It continued at the dock. Ethan checked the ropes securing his boat, hands moving through familiar motions. The wood creaked beneath him, the water lapping gently against the hull. Rook didn't step onto the dock right away. It stood at the edge, head low, scanning beneath the planks, then the water line, then the far end where the dock met open space. Ethan followed its gaze. Nothing. Just water. Still, the dog waited. Then, only when it seemed satisfied, it stepped forward. Each movement placed with precision, claws clicking softly against the boards. Ethan tightened the knot on the rope. Slower than usual. He didn't like what his mind was doing. Connecting things. Assigning meaning. He straightened, looked out across the water. "You've done this before," he said quietly. Rook didn't respond, but it didn't need to. The radio in Ethan's truck hadn't worked properly in months. It crackled more than it played anything useful, drifting between static and half-caught signals from boats too far out to matter. He turned it on anyway as he drove. Habit. The sound filled the cab in uneven bursts. Rook sat in the passenger seat, body upright, gaze forward. Still. Until the frequency shifted. A sharp spike of static cut through the noise. Rook reacted instantly. Its head snapped toward the dashboard, ears lifting. Both of them now, the damaged one straining higher than it naturally could. Its body tensed, muscles pulling tight beneath its coat. Ethan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Easy," he said, reaching out to lower the volume. The moment the static faded, Rook relaxed. Not gradually, immediately. Like a switch flipped. Ethan turned the radio off completely. Silence returned. But it didn't settle the same way it used to. He changed his route without thinking. Instead of heading back toward the house, Ethan drove toward the marina, the older side, where fewer boats docked and the building showed more years than maintenance. The road narrowed as it approached, gravel crunching under the tires. Rook shifted again. Subtle, but different this time. Its body leaned slightly forward, weight pressing toward the front of the seat. Not curiosity, tension. Ethan slowed the truck. The air felt heavier here. The smell of fuel lingered beneath the salt, sharper, less forgiving. He pulled to the side of the road, engine idling. Watched. Rook's eyes locked onto something ahead. Beyond the visible structures, past the line of rusted metal fencing that separated the dockyard from the open water. Ethan followed its line of sight. Nothing obvious, just the remains of old equipment, stacked crates, a broken light post leaning at an angle. Still, Rook let out a low sound, not a bark, not a growl, something quieter, a warning meant for one listener. Ethan felt it before he understood it, a tightening across his shoulders, a shift in balance, the same instinct that had once pulled him away from spaces that looked safe, but weren't. He opened the truck door, stepped out. Gravel crunched beneath his boots. Rook followed immediately. No hesitation this time. Positioning itself just ahead of him. Blocking. Ethan stopped, looked down. What is it? The dog didn't look back. It held its ground, body low, still. Ethan's jaw tightened. There was nothing visible, no movement, no sound beyond the distant hum of water and wind, and yet... He stepped back. One step. Then another. Rook shifted with him, easing slightly only when distance increased between them and the dockyard. Ethan didn't argue, didn't test it. He turned, walked back to the truck. Rook followed, tension bleeding off in controlled increments. Not relief, resolution. The decision came later. Not at the marina. Not on the drive back. It came while Ethan stood in his kitchen, staring at nothing in particular as the coffee machine clicked quietly in the background. Rook lay near the doorway, not sleeping, watching. Always watching. Ethan rubbed a hand across the back of his neck. He had seen enough. More than enough to draw a conclusion he didn't want. This dog wasn't just trained. It had been conditioned for environments that required anticipation, threat detection, controlled response, not obedience, function. He picked up his keys again. Rook stood before he said anything. Ethan glanced at it. "You're coming," he said. Not a question. Dr. Helen Ward's clinic sat just outside the main stretch of town, tucked between a hardware store and a stretch of open land that hadn't decided what it wanted to become yet. The building itself was unremarkable, clean, practical, without the polished edges of newer facilities. Inside, the air carried the faint scent of antiseptic and something warmer beneath it. Animal, lived in, familiar. Helen Ward stood near the back when Ethan entered. She turned as the door opened, wiping her hands on a cloth that had already seen better days. She was in her early 50s, her hair pulled back loosely, streaked with gray that didn't look like surrender but decision. Her posture was straight, not rigid, and her gaze settled on Ethan with quiet precision before shifting to the dog at his side. She didn't smile, didn't greet. She observed. For a few seconds longer than most people would. Then she nodded once. "Bring him in." Her voice was low, even, not unfriendly, just direct. Ethan stepped forward. Rook hesitated, just slightly. Helen noticed. Of course she did. She lowered herself, not fully crouching, not reaching out, just enough to reduce her presence without diminishing it. "Take your time," she said, not to Ethan, to the dog. Rook watched her, measured, then stepped forward. The examination didn't begin with touch. Helen circled once. Slow. Eyes tracing the lines of the dog's body, the way it held weight, the subtle imbalance in its stance. She stopped near the shoulder, not too close. "Where'd you find him?" she asked. "Shelter," Ethan said. "A few weeks back, they said." Helen nodded again. Her gaze shifted to the neck, paused, then moved to the ears, the eyes. Always the eyes. She stepped closer then, extending her hand, not reaching, not forcing, offering. Rook didn't pull away, but it didn't lean in either. Helen exhaled softly. "All right," she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. She straightened, looked at Ethan. "This isn't a stray." Ethan didn't respond, he already knew that. Helen continued. "This dog's been trained," she said, "not basic obedience, structured work." She paused, tilted her head slightly as if aligning a thought before speaking it. Controlled exposure, environmental conditioning, likely under stress. Ethan felt something settle in his chest. Heavy, familiar. Helen's eyes narrowed just a fraction. Then she said it, carefully. "This dog didn't just learn commands," she said. "It operated in them." Silence held for a moment, not empty, waited. Ethan glanced at Rook. The dog stood still, alert, present, like it understood more than it should. Ethan looked back at Helen. "What kind of environment?" he asked. Helen didn't answer immediately. She studied him first, not judging, assessing. Then, "Combat," she said. The word didn't echo. It didn't need to. It landed exactly where it was meant to. Later, as Ethan stepped back outside, the sun felt sharper than before, less forgiving. Rook moved beside him. Not ahead, not behind. Beside. Ethan paused near the truck, looked down at the dog. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Something had shifted, not between them, within him. A question forming where certainty used to sit. He opened the door. Rook climbed in without hesitation. This time, Ethan noticed the difference. He closed the door slowly, walked around, sat behind the wheel. Didn't start the engine right away. His reflection in the windshield looked back at him. Older than he remembered, less certain. He exhaled, turned the key. The engine came to life. As he pulled onto the road, a thought pressed forward. Clearer now, less avoidable. This isn't coincidence. He didn't know what it was. Not yet. But for the first time since leaving the service, Ethan Cross felt like something was beginning, not ending. Ethan didn't go back to the marina the next day, or the day after. Not because he was avoiding it. He simply stopped moving toward places that asked questions he couldn't yet answer. Instead, he stayed inside. The house, once just a place to pass time, became something else. Contained, quieter, almost sealed off from the rest of the world. The windows were open, the same as always, letting in the sound of the ocean. But it didn't reach him in the same way. There was a difference now. Not in the air, in him. The laptop sat on the small kitchen table, its screen casting a dull glow against the wood. Ethan hadn't turned it on in weeks, maybe longer. He stood there for a while before sitting down, hands resting on either side of the keyboard, not touching it yet. The muscles in his forearms tightened slightly, like they were anticipating resistance. He exhaled, opened it. The system took its time waking up, the cursor blinking like it wasn't sure it wanted to be involved in whatever came next. Ethan navigated without hesitation. Old folders, archived files, encrypted directories he hadn't accessed since before he left the service. It was all still there. Or at least it looked like it was. Operation Silent Current. The name sat in the center of the screen, clean, contained, final. Ethan clicked. The report opened without delay. He read it once, then again, slower. The language was clinical, structured. The kind of writing designed to remove uncertainty, to compress chaos into something manageable. Extraction completed under hostile conditions. All primary objectives met. Team accounted for. No significant losses. Ethan leaned back slightly in his chair. His eyes stayed on the screen. There was nothing technically wrong with the report. Every line followed protocol. Every conclusion aligned with what he remembered. That was the problem. It aligned too cleanly. He scrolled, looking for something that didn't fit. There were timestamps, coordinates, environmental notes, but there were no gaps, no anomalies, no wait. Ethan's jaw tightened. Operations like that didn't go clean, not in the conditions described, not with the variables listed. Something should have been there, a deviation, a complication, anything. Instead, it read like a simulation. Behind him, Rook shifted. The dog had been lying near the doorway, head resting on its front paws, eyes half closed but never fully gone. Now it lifted its head, watching Ethan without moving closer. Ethan didn't turn, but he knew he could feel the presence, not intrusive, not demanding, just there. He opened a secondary file, communications log, fragmented, short bursts of recorded transmissions, some distorted, some incomplete. He pressed play. Static filled the room, low and uneven. Then, a voice. Faint. Movement, left side. Cut. Another. Hold position. Distortion swallowed the rest. Ethan leaned forward, elbows on the table. His focus narrowed. The sound pulled at something just beneath the surface of his thoughts. Not memory. Not yet. Just pressure. He played the next segment. This one clearer. Too clear. We're good. Keep moving. The voice was his. There was no hesitation in it, no uncertainty. Controlled, confident. Ethan paused the playback. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. That was how he remembered it. Steady, decisive, everything under control. He exhaled slowly, pressed play again, static, wind, then a sound that didn't belong, metal, strained, shifting under weight. Ethan's hand froze. Something moved behind his eyes, not a full image, just a flash, red, brief, unstable. He blinked. The kitchen came back into focus. The screen still glowed in front of him. Rook was standing now. Closer. Ethan sat back, ran a hand over his face. Just fragments, he muttered. But the word didn't settle right. Fragments implied something missing. This didn't feel like absence. It felt like interference. He stood, pushed the chair back harder than necessary. The legs scraped against the floor, sharp and sudden in the quiet space. Rook didn't flinch. It stepped forward instead, slow, deliberate. Ethan moved toward the sink, turning the faucet on without thinking, letting cold water run over his hands. The sensation grounded him for a moment. Then, another flash, this time stronger. The deck of something, not stable, rocking. Red light stuttering against metal surfaces. A shape moving too fast to track. A voice, not controlled this time. Shouting, cut short. Ethan's grip tightened around the edge of the sink. The water continued running. Unnoticed. I remember this, he said under his breath. But the words came out wrong. Not certainty, conviction. Like he was trying to force the memory into shape. Behind him, Rook let out a low sound. Not warning, not distress. Something closer to insistence. Ethan turned. Too quickly. The room tilted for half a second, then corrected. Rook was closer now, not touching, watching, always watching. Ethan took a step back, then another. His heel caught the edge of the chair behind him. He lost balance. And the world snapped. Water, cold. Not the controlled surface of the Gulf. This was different, violent, pulling, dragging. Ethan's breath hitched. His chest tightened as if something had wrapped around it. A hand, no, a force, gripping his arm, pulling. He couldn't see clearly. The red light was still there. Flashing, disorienting. A voice, closer now, urgent, not his. Then weight against him, solid, holding, keeping him from going under. Ethan hit the floor hard. The impact broke the image. Air rushed back into his lungs in a sharp, uncontrolled inhale. The kitchen ceiling came into view, still, unmoving, real. For a second he didn't move, didn't process, just lay there, breathing. Then pressure, firm, grounding, Rook. The dog had moved in close, its body positioned partially over Ethan's torso, not crushing, not aggressive. Stabilizing. Ethan's first instinct was to push it away. He didn't. Something in the positioning stopped him. This wasn't random. Rook's weight shifted slightly, adjusting as Ethan's breathing changed, not reacting, anticipating. Ethan swallowed. Hard. "What are you doing?" he murmured. The words barely made it out. Rook didn't respond. It stayed, holding him in place. Ethan's breathing slowed, gradually. Each inhale less sharp than the last. Each exhale longer, more controlled. The pressure in his chest eased, not gone, managed. Rook stepped back, only when it was sure. Ethan remained on the floor a moment longer, staring at the ceiling. The fragments lingered, not clear, not complete, but different now, not distant, closer, too close. He sat up slowly. The room stayed stable this time, no shift, no tilt. He looked at the dog, really looked. Not at the posture, not at the behavior, at the timing, the precision. The way it had moved before he fully collapsed, the way it had known. Ethan pushed himself to his feet, walked back to the table. The laptop screen was still open, the report unchanged. The same clean lines, the same controlled language. He stared at it. Longer this time. Then he spoke. Quiet, flat. "That's not what happened." The words settled into the room. He didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. He clicked back to the communication logs. Scrolled. Faster now, not reading, searching. Looking for something that matched what he had just seen. What he had just felt. Something broken. Incomplete. Real. The cursor moved, stopped. A segment marked incomplete. Corrupted. Previously ignored. Ethan hesitated, just for a second. Then pressed play. Static. Heavy. Then a fragment. "We're not clear. Repeat, not..." The rest dissolved into noise. But the tone, the urgency, that wasn't in the report. That wasn't in the version he remembered. Ethan leaned back slowly. His eyes drifted to Rook. The dog stood near the doorway again. Same position, same angle, but now... Ethan saw something he hadn't before. Not recognition, not familiarity, connection. He exhaled, long, unsteady. "You were there," he said, not a question, not an assumption, a statement. Rook didn't move. But it didn't look away either. Ethan turned back to the screen, the clean report, the broken audio, the fragments in his mind. They didn't match. They never had. He just hadn't seen it, or hadn't wanted to. The house felt smaller now, not physically, but in the way it held what he knew, or thought he knew. Ethan closed the laptop. The sound was soft. Final. For now. He stood there, one hand resting on the table. Rook shifted slightly, settling again near the doorway. Not guarding, not intervening, just present. Ethan looked toward the window. The ocean was still there. Unchanged. Calm. But it didn't look the same anymore. Not after what had surfaced. Not after what had almost been remembered. He tightened his jaw. Just slightly. There was something wrong. Not with the memory, with the version of it he had been carrying. And for the first time, Ethan Cross understood something that had been just out of reach. He hadn't forgotten. He had believed. Ethan didn't go home right away. He drove without direction at first, the road unfolding ahead of him in long, quiet stretches that didn't ask for decisions. The trees blurred past in uneven lines, shadows cutting across the windshield in intervals that felt almost deliberate. Rook stayed still in the passenger seat, not watching him, not watching the road, just present. That had become its own kind of pressure. The name sat in Ethan's mind like something unfinished. Rook. Not just a name, a designation, something assigned, not chosen. Marcus hadn't hesitated when he said it. That meant it wasn't a guess. It was fact. Ethan tightened his grip on the steering wheel, then loosened it. Control didn't come from force. He knew that. By the time he reached the edge of town again, the sun had shifted, pulling the color out of the sky and flattening everything into something harsher, more exposed. He parked near the small municipal building where local records were kept. Not because he expected answers there, but because it was a place to start. Inside, the air was cooler, dry in a way that felt artificial. A man behind the counter looked up briefly, then back down at his paperwork without comment. No questions, no curiosity. Ethan appreciated that. The process wasn't fast. Old systems rarely were. What Ethan needed wasn't in the obvious places. No clean file labeled K9 operations, no direct access to military records through civilian channels. But there were overlaps, ports, rescue reports, incident logs. He moved through them methodically, not searching for confirmation, searching for inconsistencies. It took longer than he expected. Hours, maybe more. Time lost its structure somewhere between the pages. Then, a mention, brief, almost dismissible. Unidentified K9 recovered near eastern shoreline following reported offshore explosion. Ethan's eyes stopped. Didn't move forward. Didn't skip ahead. He read the line again, then again. No classification, no follow-up, just a note. Logged and buried. He copied the reference number, tracked it. Followed it through a chain of unrelated reports until it shifted from official documentation into something smaller. Local, personal. That was how he found the name, not in a system. In a note attached to a handwritten intake record at the shelter. Turner. No first name listed. Just a last name. And a date. Years ago. Ethan stepped back from the desk. The room felt smaller now. Not because of the walls, because the path had narrowed. There was only one direction left to go. The address was still valid. Barely. The house sat closer to the water than most. A weathered structure that looked like it had resisted improvement out of principle rather than neglect. The paint had long since faded into something indistinct, and the porch sagged just enough to suggest it had held more weight than it was built for. Ethan knocked once, waited. No response. He knocked again, this time footsteps. Slow, measured. The door opened a few inches. A woman stood there, her hand still on the edge of the frame. She was in her late 30s, maybe early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a loose tie and a face that carried the kind of quiet endurance that didn't come from comfort. Her eyes moved quickly, not nervous but attentive. "You lost?" she asked. Her voice wasn't unfriendly, just cautious. Ethan shook his head slightly. "Looking for Turner," he said. "Not sure if I've got the right place." The woman studied him for a moment longer than necessary, then opened the door wider. "You do," she said, "but you're late." Ethan didn't react. "What do you mean?" She stepped back, letting him inside. "My father," she said. "Caleb Turner." A pause. "He passed 2 years ago." The name settled. Final. Ethan nodded once. "Didn't know." "No reason you would." The inside of the house smelled faintly of salt and old wood, like the structure had absorbed the environment and decided to keep it. The furniture was sparse but worn in the way things get when they've been used for exactly what they were meant for and nothing more. The woman moved toward the kitchen, gesturing for Ethan to follow. "You said you were looking for him," she said. Why? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He was still looking around. Not for exits this time, for traces. Records, he said finally, from the shelter. That made her stop, just for a second. Then she nodded slowly. He found a lot of things out there, she said. Didn't keep most of them. Her tone shifted slightly, but some things stayed. Ethan's attention sharpened. What kind of things? The woman turned, leaning lightly against the counter. Things that didn't leave when they should have, she said. It wasn't vague, it was deliberate. Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, scrolled briefly, then turned the screen toward her. A photo. Rook. Taken earlier that morning. Standing near the doorway of Ethan's house, one ear straight, the other slightly off. The woman's expression changed, not dramatically, but enough. Her posture straightened, her eyes narrowed slightly, not in suspicion, in recognition. She stepped closer, looked at the image longer than expected, then exhaled. "That's him," she said. Ethan didn't move. "Your father's dog?" he asked. She shook her head. "No," she said. "He never called it that." The words landed differently than Ethan expected. "What did he call it?" The woman gave a small, almost tired smile. "He didn't." Ethan frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" She looked past him toward the window, like she was aligning memory with something outside of herself. "He said it wasn't his to name," she said. A pause. Like it belonged somewhere else. Something shifted, quiet, but precise. Ethan lowered the phone slowly. "Where did he find it?" The woman's gaze returned to him. "After a storm," she said. "Or at least that's what he told me." She hesitated, then added, "There was an explosion offshore that night. People talked about it for a while. Coast Guard got involved. Then it just stopped." Ethan's chest tightened. Not sudden, gradual. Like something was pulling into alignment piece by piece. "He found the dog in the water," she continued. "Barely alive. Wouldn't let him touch it at first." Ethan could picture that, too clearly. "He stayed with it anyway," she said. "Sat there for hours until it stopped trying to get away." Ethan's hand tightened slightly at his side. "Did it recover?" The woman nodded. "Eventually." A faint smile again. "He never treated it like something broken, just something passing through." She moved toward a cabinet, opening it without hesitation, reaching inside. For a moment, Ethan thought she might come back empty-handed. Then she returned with something small, metal, worn. She held it out. Ethan didn't take it right away, just looked. A collar tag, scratched, faded, but still intact. "I found it after he died," she said. "Didn't know what to do with it." Ethan reached out, took it carefully. The metal was cool against his skin. Lighter than it should have been, like it had already given up part of its weight. There were markings on it, faint, but visible. Not a name, a number, and beneath it, a symbol, small, military. Ethan's breath slowed, then steadied. He didn't need to read it twice. He already knew. Behind him, the floor shifted slightly. Rook, the dog, had moved. Ethan hadn't noticed it come in, but it was there now. Standing in the doorway, still, watching. The woman followed Ethan's gaze. Her expression softened slightly. "He used to stand like that," she said. Ethan didn't look away. "Like what?" She tilted her head, like he was waiting for something to come back. Ethan's fingers closed around the tag. Tighter, not enough to bend it, just enough to feel it. Real. He nodded once. "Thank you," he said. The woman didn't respond right away. Then, "If it matters," she said quietly. He never thought it was lost. Ethan turned slightly. "What do you mean?" She met his eyes. "He said some things don't get lost," she said. "They just end up where they're needed." Ethan didn't answer. He didn't know how to. Outside, the air had shifted again. Cooler now, the sun lowering, pulling the day back with it. Ethan walked to the truck. Rook followed, not leading, not guarding, just there. He opened the door, paused, then looked down at the dog. Really looked this time. Not for behavior, not for signs, for something else. "You stayed," he said quietly. The words weren't directed. They weren't a question. Rook didn't move, didn't react, but it didn't look away. Ethan didn't call Daniel either. There was a pattern to that now, not avoidance, not urgency, just a refusal to let anything soften before it needed to. Daniel Brooks lived farther inland than Marcus, in a stretch of land where the road didn't bother pretending to be smooth. The tires of Ethan's truck rolled over gravel and packed dirt, each turn marked more by memory than signage. The house was small, set low against the land as if it had settled there instead of being built. A single porch wrapped around the front, shaded by a roof that had been patched more than once. Ethan parked a short distance away. He didn't get out immediately. Rook sat beside him. This time, its posture was different. Not alert, not assessing. Still, but looser. The edge that had been there before had softened, just enough to notice. Ethan glanced at it briefly, then back to the house. He stepped out. Daniel was already outside. Sitting on the porch, one leg stretched out, the other bent at the knee. A metal cane leaned against the chair beside him, not held, just there, like something he acknowledged but didn't rely on unless necessary. He looked up as Ethan approached, didn't stand, didn't call out, just watched. There was no surprise in his expression, but there was something else. Recognition. Not of Ethan's face, of why he had come. "You took your time," Daniel said. His voice was rougher than Ethan remembered, worn down in a way that didn't come from age alone. Ethan stopped at the base of the steps. "Had to be sure." Daniel nodded once. "About what?" Ethan didn't answer right away. The silence wasn't uncomfortable. It was functional. Then, "That it wasn't just me," Ethan said. Daniel leaned back slightly in his chair. A faint smile crossed his face. Not amused, not dismissive, just understanding. "Never is," he said. Ethan stepped onto the porch. The wood creaked beneath his weight, the sound sharp in the quiet afternoon. Rook followed. This time, Daniel noticed. His eyes shifted downward, taking in the dog's posture, the way it held itself, the way it didn't react to him at all. For a moment, Daniel didn't say anything. Then, "Well," he muttered, almost to himself. "That explains a few things." Ethan didn't ask what he meant. He didn't need to. "Sit," Daniel said, nodding toward the empty chair beside him. Ethan remained standing for a second longer than necessary, then sat. Rook settled near the edge of the porch. Not between them, not guarding, just present. The air was still, no wind, no movement in the trees, the kind of quiet that didn't distract, didn't soften. "You talked to Marcus," Daniel said. Not a question. Ethan nodded once. Daniel exhaled, long. "Figured he'd hold out longer," he said. Ethan glanced at him. He didn't fight it. Daniel let out a low chuckle. "That's not how he fights." A pause. Then Ethan spoke. "He told me about the call." Daniel's gaze shifted, focused now. "Which part?" "The part where I moved us forward." Daniel didn't respond immediately. He picked up the cane beside him, turning it slowly in his hands, not using it, just occupying them. Then, "You did," he said. The confirmation didn't hit the way Ethan expected. No surge, no collapse, just placement. Like something heavy being set down exactly where it belonged. "We had movement," Ethan said. Daniel nodded. "Yeah. I thought it was nothing." Daniel looked at him. Really looked. "That's the thing about nothing," he said. "It rarely is." Ethan leaned forward slightly, elbows resting on his knees, his hands clasped together. Tight. Why didn't anyone say anything? The question came out sharper than intended. Daniel didn't flinch. "Because it wouldn't have changed anything," he said. Ethan's head lifted. "That's not—" "It is," Daniel cut in, not raising his voice. "You made the call based on what you saw. That's the job." Ethan shook his head. It was the wrong call. Daniel tilted his head slightly. "Maybe," he said, then added, "but that's not the whole story." Ethan's jaw tightened. "That's the part that matters." Daniel studied him for a long second, then, "No," he said quietly. "It's the part you're stuck on." The words didn't hit like an accusation. They landed like something already known. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhaled slowly. "You got hurt because of it." Daniel looked down at his leg, then back up. "Yeah," he said simply. "No blame, no emphasis, just fact." Ethan's gaze dropped. For a moment, the space between them felt heavier than anything that had been said. Then, Daniel spoke again. "You think I'd trade places with you?" he asked. Ethan looked up, didn't answer. Daniel shook his head. "Don't," he said. "That's not how it works." Silence settled again. But it wasn't the same kind as before. This one held less tension. More weight that had already been carried. "You remember the water?" Daniel asked. Ethan's body stilled slightly. "Fragments," he said. Daniel nodded. "Yeah, that sounds right." He leaned forward now, resting his forearms on his thighs. "You didn't fall clean," he said. "You went over hard. Gear, weight, you were going down." Ethan's chest tightened, controlled, but there. Daniel continued. "We couldn't reach you in time." A pause. Then, "But something else did." Ethan's eyes shifted. Not to Daniel, to Rook. The dog hadn't moved, but something in the way it held itself had changed, subtle, barely noticeable. But there. Daniel followed his gaze, his expression softened, just slightly. "That dog," he said quietly, then stopped, adjusted. "Not this one," he corrected. "The one on the op." Ethan didn't speak, didn't interrupt. "It didn't hesitate," Daniel said. "Didn't wait for a command, just went." He leaned back again, eyes unfocused for a moment, like he was looking at something that wasn't there anymore. "I remember thinking that was it," he added, "that neither of you were coming back up." Ethan's fingers tightened together, not enough to hurt, just enough to feel. "But you did," Daniel said. A small pause, then, "And it did too." Ethan's head lifted slightly. That wasn't in the report. That wasn't what Marcus had said. Daniel noticed the shift. His brow furrowed. "What?" he asked. Ethan shook his head slowly. "Nothing." But it wasn't nothing. Daniel studied him for a second longer, then let it go. "You want to know what I remember most?" Daniel asked. Ethan didn't answer, but he didn't need to. "It wasn't the gunfire," Daniel said, "wasn't the water." He tapped the cane lightly against the porch, a quiet, rhythmic sound. "It was the way that dog held on to you," he said. Ethan's breath slowed. "Didn't panic," Daniel continued. "Didn't thrash, just held you there." A pause. Like it knew if it let go for even a second, you were gone. The words settled deep. Deeper than anything Marcus had said. Because there was no strategy in them, no justification, just memory. Ethan looked down at his hands, then at the ground, then, "I didn't know," he said. Daniel shrugged lightly. "You weren't supposed to." Another pause. Then Ethan asked, "Why didn't you tell me?" Daniel's expression didn't change. "You didn't need to know," he said. Ethan's gaze sharpened. "That's not your call." Daniel nodded. "Maybe not," then added, "But it didn't change what happened?" Ethan exhaled, long, unsteady. Daniel leaned back again, resting into the chair. "You're trying to fix it," he said. Ethan didn't deny it. Daniel shook his head slightly. "Can't," he said. Ethan looked up. "I can't just—" "Yeah," Daniel interrupted. "You can." Silence. Then Daniel met his eyes and said the one thing that didn't leave. "You didn't make it out because you were right," he said. A beat. "You made it out because something refused to leave you behind." The words didn't echo. They didn't need to. They settled, stayed. Ethan didn't respond. Not right away. He let it sit, let it take shape, not as an answer, as a shift. When he finally stood, it wasn't abrupt, it wasn't decisive, it was quieter, more deliberate. Rook stood too, not immediately, but in time. Ethan looked down at the dog. For a moment, there was no distance left between what he knew and what he felt. Just something beginning to align. He turned back to Daniel, gave a small nod. "Thanks." Daniel nodded back. "Don't make it heavier than it already is," he said. Ethan stepped off the porch. The gravel shifted beneath his boots again, same sound, different weight. Rook moved beside him. Closer now, not touching, but closer. Ethan opened the truck door, paused, then looked down at the dog again. This time, when Rook stepped up, it didn't hesitate, and neither did Ethan. The first man didn't come for help. He came because he didn't know where else to go. Ethan met him at the edge of the dock just after sunrise, when the light hadn't fully committed to the day and everything still felt undecided. The man stood a few yards away, hands shoved deep into the pockets of a worn jacket, despite the heat already beginning to rise. He was younger than Ethan, early 30s maybe, but the way he held himself made the difference in years feel irrelevant. Not broken, just misaligned. Ethan didn't ask questions, didn't offer introductions. He simply nodded once. The man nodded back. That was enough. Rook stayed behind Ethan at first, not hidden, just not forward, observing. "You said you had a dog," the man said after a moment. His voice was tight, not with fear, but with control that took effort. Ethan glanced back briefly. "Yeah." The man hesitated, then added, "I don't do well with sudden movement." Ethan nodded again. "Then we won't do anything sudden." There was no plan, no structured session, no system. Ethan didn't believe in those, not for this. He stepped aside, not gesturing, just shifting his position, giving space. Rook responded to the change. It moved, slow, deliberate, not approaching the man directly, not circling, just entering the shared space. The man stiffened slightly. Ethan saw it, didn't comment. "Stay where you are," Ethan said quietly, not to the man, to the moment. Rook stopped, 10 feet away, still, not staring, not ignoring, just present. Minutes passed, not long, but long enough. The man's breathing changed first. Less tight, more even. He didn't move his hands from his pockets, but his shoulders dropped slightly. Ethan watched, said nothing. Then the man spoke again. "He's not coming closer?" Ethan shook his head. "Not unless you want him to." Another pause, then, "I don't know what I want." The honesty wasn't dramatic, it was simple, unfiltered. Ethan nodded once. "That's fine," he said. They stayed like that for a while. 3 figures on a quiet dock, no movement, no urgency. Eventually the man stepped back, not abruptly, Just enough to create distance? "I'll come back," he said. Ethan didn't ask when. "All right." The man left without looking back. Ethan didn't watch him go. Behind him, Rook shifted, just slightly. Ethan glanced down. The dog's posture hadn't changed much, but something about the way it held itself felt different, less contained. That was how it started, not with a decision, with repetition. One man became two. Two became three, not all at once, not on purpose, just gradually. Word moved the way it always did in small places, quietly, without announcement. Ethan didn't advertise, didn't organize. People came when they needed something they couldn't name, and they stayed as long as it didn't feel forced. There were no rules, only boundaries, no sudden movement, no raised voices, no expectations. Rook adapted. Not in a way that felt trained, in a way that felt chosen. It learned each person differently, kept distance with some, closed it with others, never rushed, never demanded. Ethan noticed something he hadn't expected. It didn't treat them like strangers, but it didn't treat them like him either. There was a difference. Subtle, but real. One afternoon, a man named Carter arrived, late 40s, broad shoulders but carrying them unevenly, like one side remembered something the other didn't. He didn't speak much, didn't need to. Ethan recognized the type, not from files, from presence. They stood near the edge of the dock. Rook positioned itself between them, not blocking, not guarding, balancing. "You train him?" Carter asked. Ethan shook his head. "No." Carter frowned slightly. "Then how does he know what to do?" Ethan glanced at the dog, watched the way it adjusted its stance as a boat passed in the distance, the way it remained grounded without tension. "He doesn't," Ethan said. "He decides." Carter didn't respond. But something in his expression shifted. Not understanding. Recognition. That moment stayed with Ethan longer than he expected. Not because of the words, because of what they meant. Later that evening, after everyone had left, the dock returned to its usual stillness. The water moved in slow, steady patterns beneath the fading light. The air cooled. Not enough to change anything, just enough to notice. Ethan sat on the edge of the porch, elbows resting on his knees, watching the horizon the way he used to. But it didn't feel the same. Not empty, not neutral. Rook lay a few feet away, not watching the perimeter, not scanning, just there. Ethan leaned back slightly, stretching his shoulders, letting the tension ease in places he hadn't realized were still holding it. For a long time, neither of them moved. Then, something changed. Small, but unmistakable. Rook shifted, not to stand, not to adjust position. It stood, walked over, slow, unhurried. Ethan watched, didn't reach out, didn't call it closer. The dog stopped beside him, not in front, not behind, beside. Then, without hesitation, Rook lowered its head, rested it against Ethan's leg. The contact was light, not pressing, not asking, just there. Ethan's breath caught slightly, not sharp, just enough to register. He didn't move right away, didn't react the way he might have before, didn't turn it into something else. He just stayed. Time passed, unmeasured, unnecessary. Then, slowly, Ethan lifted his hand. Not with intent, not with command, just movement. His palm rested against the side of Rook's head, warm, solid, real. The dog didn't shift, didn't pull away, didn't lean further in. It held the contact, the same way it had held him. Ethan exhaled. Long, quiet. There was no realization, no sudden clarity, no words forming to explain what this meant. Just a difference. Not in the past. That hadn't changed. Not in what had happened. That never would. but in how it sat inside him for the first time. It didn't feel like something that needed to be corrected or undone. It felt like something that had been carried and could now be set down. Not forgotten, not erased, just placed. The sky darkened slowly, the last light fading without urgency. Ethan kept his hand where it was, didn't move, didn't speak. He didn't need to, because for the first time, he wasn't holding on to survival like it was a question. He was holding on to it like it was an answer. Sometimes the hardest choices in life don't come with a clear right or wrong. Like Peter, we are not always called to fix everything or restore what was lost. Sometimes we are simply called to take responsibility for what is in our hands, and to do less harm, even when we don't fully understand the outcome. There will be moments when the world around you feels uncertain, when things don't return to the way they used to be. In those moments, remember this: grace is not always about changing everything. Sometimes it is about learning how to stand, to choose wisely, and to move forward without making things worse. If this story meant something to you, take a moment to reflect. What would you choose when there is no perfect answer? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments, and if you believe stories like this matter, consider subscribing to stay connected. May you be given wisdom in your decisions, peace in your uncertainty, and the strength to carry what is yours to carry.